The game Brooke had chosen to play did not escalate in a straight line. It deepened quietly, almost imperceptibly, until the ground beneath everyone involved began to shift in ways none of them could fully control. What had started as a calculated attempt to extract information from Bill Spencer gradually evolved into something far more dangerous. A psychological duel where neither side was entirely certain where strategy ended and emotion began. In the days that followed their first meeting, Brooke did not rush. She understood that urgency would betray intention. Instead, she allowed space, carefully measured intervals between interactions, each one designed to feel organic, unforced. A message here, a brief encounter there. Enough to maintain connection, not enough to raise immediate suspicion. But Bill noticed the pattern. Of course he did. He had built his empire not just on power, but on perception, on the ability to read what others concealed behind words and gestures. And Brooke, for all her experience, was not invisible to him. Still, he played along, because there was something undeniably compelling about the situation, about her, and about the question lingering beneath every interaction. What exactly was she willing to risk? Their second meeting was less tentative, more direct. Brooke arrived with the same composed vulnerability, but this time there was a subtle shift in her tone, less reflective, more inquisitive. She didn't ask outright questions about the Logan brand's sudden rise. Instead, she circled it, drawing connections, making observations that invited clarification without demanding it. "It's impressive," she said at one point, her voice thoughtful. "The way everything came together so quickly. Timing like that, it doesn't just happen." Bill watched her over the rim of his glass, the faintest hint of a smile forming. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." He let the silence stretch just long enough to suggest possibility, just long enough for her to think he might say more. Then he didn't. It was a test, and Brooke recognized it. So she didn't push. Not yet. Instead, she shifted again, back toward familiarity, toward shared history, toward the emotional terrain where defenses tend to weaken. She spoke of moments they had once shared, of choices that had taken them in different directions, of the strange way certain connections never fully disappear. Bill listened, but this time there was a sharper edge to his attention. Because now, he wasn't just responding. He was evaluating. "You're good," he said finally. Brooke tilted her head slightly. "At what?" "At making this feel real," he replied. The words landed somewhere between compliment and warning. Brooke held his gaze, her expression steady. "Maybe it is real," she said. Bill let out a quiet laugh. "That's the problem," he said. "With you, it's always both." The truth of that statement lingered between them, uncomfortably precise, because Brooke herself was no longer entirely certain where the line was. What had begun as strategy was starting to blur with something else, something less controlled, less defined. The past she was invoking, the emotions she was referencing, they weren't fabricated. They were remembered. And memory, when revisited often enough, has a way of reshaping the present. Back at Forrester Creations, the consequences of her actions continued to ripple outward. Ridge Forrester remained focused on the legal battle, confident in their position, but increasingly aware that something beneath the surface was shifting. Brooke's distance had not gone unnoticed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious. But it was there, in the pauses between conversations, in the moments when her attention seemed elsewhere, in the subtle hesitation before she answered questions she would once have addressed without thought. "You're not telling me everything," Ridge said one evening, his tone calm but firm. Brooke turned toward him, already prepared for the question. "I've told you everything that matters," she replied. It was a careful answer, true in structure, but incomplete. Ridge studied her, searching for something more, something that would confirm or deny the instinct he couldn't quite shake. "And the things that don't?" he asked. Brooke held his gaze. "They're not relevant," she said. The conversation ended there, but the doubt did not. Meanwhile, Katie was not standing still. The humiliation of the interrupted show had not broken her. It had hardened her. The pain of Brooke's betrayal, though deep, had transformed into something sharper, resolve. She refused to let that moment define her. With Bill at her side, she began to rebuild. Not publicly, not yet, but strategically. Quiet meetings, alternative plans, new partnerships forming beneath the surface. And Bill, for all his engagement with Brooke, remained fully committed to that effort, which made Brooke's position even more precarious. Because every moment she spent trying to gain his trust was a moment he could use to strengthen his own. The turning point came unexpectedly. It wasn't during a confrontation or a revelation, but during something far more subtle. A moment of miscalculation. Brooke had grown more confident. Too confident, perhaps. The rhythm of her interactions with Bill had begun to feel predictable, controlled. She believed she understood his responses, his patterns, the way he engaged. So she took a risk. A small one, but enough. "I've been thinking," she said during one of their meetings, her tone casual, almost reflective, "about the way you shifted everything so quickly. The suppliers, the production timelines, it must have required a lot of cooperation." The word was deliberate, loaded. Bill's reaction was immediate. Not outwardly, but internally, because that was not an observation. It was a probe, and a precise one. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. "You're asking the wrong questions," he said calmly. Brooke frowned slightly, as if confused. "Am I?" Bill set his glass down slowly. "Yes," he said, "because the right question isn't how I did it." A pause. Just long enough. "It's why you need to know." The shift was undeniable. The balance had changed, and Brooke felt it instantly. But instead of retreating, she held her ground. "Maybe I just want to understand what I'm up against," she said. Bill stepped closer, not aggressively, but deliberately. "You already know what you're up against," he said quietly. "The question is, do you know what you're doing?" The implication was clear. He knew. Not everything, but enough. And now, the game had entered a new phase. Because this was no longer about subtle manipulation or careful extraction. This was about exposure. About whether Brooke would admit what she was doing, or continue to play a role that was no longer entirely convincing. For the first time since this began, she hesitated. And that hesitation told Bill everything he needed to know. He smiled, not with triumph, but with recognition. "You almost had me," he said. Brooke exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling in. "Almost?" she asked. Bill's expression softened, but only slightly. "Not really," he replied. The words should have ended the interaction, should have drawn a clear line. But instead, something unexpected happened. Neither of them moved. Because despite the exposure, despite the strategy, despite the awareness on both sides, there was still something unresolved between them. Something that didn't belong to the game. And that made everything more complicated. Because now, the risk wasn't just professional. It was personal. As Brooke left that night, the reality of her situation became impossible to ignore. She had not succeeded. Not fully. And in failing, she had revealed more than she intended. If Bill chose to act on that, if he chose to tell Katie, or worse, Ridge, the consequences would be immediate and severe. Back at home, the distance between her and Ridge felt more pronounced than ever. The silence between them carried weight now, not just of unspoken concerns, but of something deeper, something that threatened to surface at any moment. And somewhere across the city, Bill made a decision. Not about business, not about retaliation, but about timing. Because now, he held something valuable. Not just information, but leverage. And how he chose to use it would determine not only the outcome of this conflict, but the fate of every relationship entangled within it. As the lines between loyalty and betrayal, strategy and emotion, truth and manipulation continued to blur, one thing became increasingly clear. Brooke had stepped into a game she thought she understood. But now, she was no longer the one controlling it.